Okay, we're back again. We have made the profile of the cane, and you can see how it's a little thinner in the middle where this line is and a little thicker towards the ends. What we're going to do now is bend it back over the knife carefully. And then we're going to start making the shape of the reed. Now, I'm going to show you something. I'm going to put a little clip on that for now so it'll stay put. I'm going to show you what bassoon reed makers used to use. They used to use a shaper like this. You would fold the piece of cane over this, secure it with these little rods, and then just cut down to the sides, and you'd have your perfect shape for a reed. A friend of mine also made one that would work for certain racket reeds, supported in a slightly different way. But since I would need about 25 of these because we have so many different sizes of instruments and reeds, we're going to do this by hand. So I'm going to take the clip back off. The first thing we're going to do is look at the plans. This is the tenor Krummhorn reed plans. The middle dimension, the middle line, we want to make that 19 millimeters across. And then at the first wire, we're going to make that 15 millimeters across. And then at the very end of the piece of cane, it's going to be 10.5 millimeters. So the way to do this is you take your, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this, but I'm going to put it down here. I'm going to overlay the tip just a little bit beyond this line here, because when we cut the reed off, that will be gone. So we're going to make the dimensions starting about 1 millimeter over this line. Then we want to put this 15 millimeter line right there, and then the bottom line right there. And you can kind of make a line that goes straight across. This is just for reference at the moment. And you want to put that on both sides. So we're going to make a nice mirror image. Then you take your calipers and let's just measure the tip. The tip is about 26.5 millimeters. Now we have a long ways to go because the plan says 19 millimeters, and you can see it's much wider than it needs to be. So I have a method of kind of keeping myself symmetrical here. So what I'm going to do is draw some what I call grid lines. Draw one, about a little ways from the top, and another one just a little ways farther. This kind of gives us an idea. I'll put them on both sides. They don't have to be perfect. They're just kind of rough lines. And what we're going to do is start at the top and take about 1 millimeter off one side. Turn it over, take about 1 millimeter off of the other side, and then measure. We know that's too big, but we're going to measure it anyway. So that is 24 millimeters. So you know the old adage, measure twice, cut once. So we're going to measure, every time we take a piece of cane off of each side, we're going to measure again. So now I'm going to go down to the next line, and I'm going to take 1 millimeter down, or thickness of cut, millimeter down. Then I'm going to go down to the third line and go about 1 millimeter, about 1 millimeter. We're working our way down, and we're going to do the next line, always turning it over and doing the next line. Now it's kind of a lumpy mess, but don't despair. We go back to the top, to the second line, third line, fourth line. fifth line. Turn it over. Okay. Better measure. It's still just 23.5. We got a long ways to go, which is why I'm not measuring every single time. And if you always start at the top, take a little bit, go to the next line, take a little bit, and you're always going to take it all the way to the bottom because the reed is this shape. So you can see how it's kind of starting to take shape. Go down here, take some off each side. Let's see what that tip looks like now. It's at about 23. Let's try that again. So we'll take a hunk. You can really do one side at a time if you only take a little bit. Go on this side, take a chunk, a chunk, a chunk. You can see this would be a lot easier with a shaper. Now we're getting about down to 21.5, and remember, our goal is 19. So it's about 21.5. Okay, let's take another. The closer you get, the smaller the cuts are. Starting to look a little bit like a reed. 20.5. Okay, I'm getting pretty close. Let's go down to 20. I always like to leave just a little bit of leeway until we're just about done. That's about 20. We want to go down to 19. So it's probably hard to tell with all these lines, but this is our middle, our first wire mark. Let's see what that's getting to be. That's about 18, and we want it to be 15. So we got 3 millimeters to go. We could take 1.5 off each side. Let's see what that is now. 18. Let's go up here a little ways. So I'm going to try to leave the very tip at 20 for now, because once you take that off, you can't put it back on. So we'll just go slowly. Start here, pull down. You can also look at it's starting to be almost a straight line. Go on the other side, turn it over. That's 17.5. We're getting closer. The thing to remember is that if you go right on the line, you won't really take all that dimension off because you'll have a little hump here. I don't know if you can see that little hump. So you always have to go back behind it and even it out. Go to this side. Okay, about to 17. I'm going to give it a little dip. And it's nice to keep it wet. So let's look at this. You can kind of see the line. It's a little bumpy. That side's a little bit better. Another thing to look for is, can you have the reed perpendicular, both sides coming in the same amount on each side? Let's see what that looks like. So it looks to me like we could take a little more off down on this side, so always keeping that nice artistic balance. Sometimes I don't think about reeds as being artistic. They're so disposable. But it has to work perfect. See where we are. 15 and a half. Getting close. So since we're getting pretty close, our goal is 14 and a half or 15. I have two sets of dimensions for different kinds of Krummhorns. You might wonder, will this style of reed work on every single Krummhorn? Well, the answer would be not exactly. It might need to be modified. This is the dimensions for the instruments that we build and some others that would work the same way. And at the end of this section, I'll tell you how to make your own reed designs. So since I'm getting pretty close to the final dimension at the first wire mark, I'm going to now put my attention down onto the end of the reed. I don't know if you can see this. You might notice also as you're working on the reed, you start to erase the pencil marks with your fingers. So you just have to put them back on once in a while. Okay, that's pretty close. So what I've drawn on now is this end, and I'm letting a little bit overlap at the top because we'll cut that off. So you can see we're just about right. Now I'm going to find out if this dimension is 10.5. Nope, it's like 13.5. So we have a long ways to go. Another thing to keep in mind is you're not going to have a perfectly straight line sometimes from the tip to this line, because some reeds are going to be wider here and narrower here depending on the tube that they're on. So don't be too overwhelmed by that either. Let's get this dimension closer to being done. Always make sure that the sides are meeting properly, and you want it to be as symmetrical as possible. See where we are. It's about 12. Got a little ways to go. This final dimension down here, 10.5, is what will fit on a 1/4 inch tube. Now some Krummhorns, you may have a Kerber Krummhorn or a Mick Krummhorn. They might take a slightly different size tube, which would mean this end dimension would be slightly different. But we're going to go for 10.5. And we got about 1.5 millimeters to go. So once I've approximated the tip and the first wire, and then I've moved down to this dimension, I usually try to get this one as close as I can to the final, maybe within 1/2 millimeter. Measure that again. Okay, that's 11. That's about close enough. We have 1/2 millimeter to go. Now I'm going to try to even it out from top to bottom. We have all these grid lines marked on there, but remember where the main markings are going to be. First wire. I'm marking that again so I know which line I'm looking at. So this is going to be about 15. That's about 16. So we have some ways to go. So you want to take it off the side that needs the most taken off. This has kind of a bump over there. I don't really like that. So let's take that bump off. That might be all we need to do. That's a little better. There's just a little bump there too. You can tell when we get to the very last few millimeters or 1/2 millimeter, we're just taking little shaves off. Still about 16, and that's about 20. And this is about 11, 12. So we could just take an overall cut. Time to go back up to the top. Take a little off of that. Yeah, there's 15.5, 20, 11, 11.5. Getting close. It's a good idea to have a nice sharp blade. These little pen knives are just perfect for this, and you can just replace the blade when they get dull. So when you start a new read, you might want to make sure, double check how sharp the blade is. It's looking pretty good. Just about 15, just like a little hair over 15. That's just a hair under 20. And that's just, this dimension down here really has to be right for it to fit on the tube. So that's one thing you have to spend a lot of attention on. It's getting this final tube measurement. For one thing, you want it to go right onto the tube and not leak. It's kind of important. Yeah. That's pretty close. Okay, so I think I have this dimension about 10.5, and I'm just going to go clean it up a little bit. Take out some of the bumps. Just about 15. I think I can take one more bump out. Looks pretty good. Yeah, 15. That's just at 20. So we need to take this one down 1 more millimeter. And if we want to look at that really carefully, we can decide what side to take it from. Maybe both sides. Looks pretty good. The hard part is taking just a little bit off, not too much. It's kind of disappointing at this point if you do too much and then you ruin it. Yeah, 19.5. We're so close. I usually leave just a little bit extra in all the dimensions, just like 1/4 of a millimeter for shrinkage. And when you put the wires on, it tends to bite into the reed a little bit and reduce the dimension just by a little bit. Okay, 15, just about 19. That's more like 11.5. We need to come down a little more. Measure that. Yep. Dip. I go just a little bit above the line and maybe take a 1/2 millimeter off. Let's see if that does it on each side. Yeah, that's about right. Okay. All right. Now, by now you've got a big mess. You've got chips everywhere. Now we're done with the shape of the reed, and the next thing we're going to do is attach the reed to the tube with the wire. That'll be in the next video.